All right, joining us right now is from Minnesota, is the governor of that state and author of Courage to Stand, a new book that comes out in January. They're opening a website for that. Today, though, Governor Tim Pawlenty. Good morning to you, Governor.
Good morning.
Hey, we've been talking a lot about Minnesota lately, particularly on the weather map. You guys have had some terrible flooding. I know something like 101 bridges over the Minnesota River are closed. And now you're calling for a special one-day session of the legislature to pass some sort of relief, right?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Southern Minnesota in particular has been hit really hard, and we've got hundreds of homes that are damaged, lots of public infrastructure damage, but the National Guard, our first responders, communities, neighbors have done a great job responding. We're grateful for their good work, and we'll get these communities rebuilt, but the state's going to have to do its share, and that's why we're having the special session probably within the next couple of weeks.
So, Governor, you've been out, and you're making sure that your party is successful in the midterm elections. Why be so active? Who are you pushing for? Where are you hands-on?
Well, Brian, I've been all over the country through my Freedom First PAC, which is at timpawlenty.com, and we're just trying to convey the message that, amongst other things, if we're going to get this economy moving in the right direction, we got to do things to encourage, not discourage the private sector. We got to do things to lighten the load, not increase their load. And unfortunately, this president and this Congress don't understand that, and so we're trying to convey that message about what it's going to take to grow jobs and grow the private sector economy in the country. And we've been all over the place, but particularly in the upper Midwest.
Let's take a look at some of the candidates that you have actively been supporting. There you see Christine O'Donnell, who you have endorsed, Marco Rubio down in Florida, Carly Fiorina in California in a tight race against Barbara Boxer, and of course Meg Whitman also in California going up in the gubernatorial campaign against Jerry Brown. Now I understand that one of the things that you obviously support is the GOP's Pledge to America, which they unveiled last week. What was your reaction to that? Can the Democrats now still call the Republicans the party of no?
No, I think the pledge is a good blueprint, and it says to the country, look, if you elect the Republicans, these are the kinds of priorities, area of focus, and outline of what we're going to do for the country. And so I applaud the next Speaker, the House Speaker Boehner, and his leadership team for putting that pledge out. I think it's a good blueprint.
Yeah. Governor, we've been talking over the last number of weeks about how the polls show that it seems like Republicans, and particularly Republican men, are the most motivated block of voters for the midterms. As you travel the country, does there seem to be one issue that has really got people hacked off across the board?
Well, clearly the issue of biggest concerns is the economy and jobs, but one thing that really is making people mad and stirring the passions is government spending and excess of government spending in the sense that government's out of control. And 10 years ago, if you asked people about the debt or the deficit, or even 5 years ago, they might say, yeah, you know, it's a problem. But it really wasn't motivating their voting behavior. This year in grocery stores and down at the hardware store, the gas station, average people, not even people involved in politics, are coming up and saying, Governor, we've had enough. We've got to get the government spending under control.
Yeah, tell it to John Kerry. He turns out he thinks the electorate is uninformed, which is a great way to reach out to the people. Governor, there's something else I think is important to bring up, is when it comes to the Bush tax cuts, and for some reason many people are still calling it that, a lot of Democrats are seeing the wisdom in extending them. 40 plus in the House, at least 5 over in the Senate. What does that say to you about the climate in Washington?
Well, I think it says the country and the Congress are reflecting what the people want, which is don't raise taxes for anybody in a recession. Don't do it at all, by the way. But to have Steny Hoyer, for example, come out and say this is the Republicans' fault that there's a stalemate on this issue is preposterous. Last time I checked, the Democrats control the whole Congress. And to have a big chunk of Democrats saying we agree with the Republicans on this should tell Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer something, which is they're wrong, and they should continue all the tax cuts, not just some of them.
But, Governor, what will the ramifications be if they actually go home on Friday and they don't vote on this? They're going to go home and face the electorate. And what's going to happen then?
Well, I think the Democrats will pay a further price for that stalemate. Again, they're in charge of all the Congress. They're in charge of the White House. It's within their power to make this happen, and they're refusing to do it, and they're letting politics get in the way of what I think most of the country, even most of the Congress and a good chunk of the Democrats agree would be good for the economy. Extend the tax cuts across the board for everybody.
Sure. Oh, okay, so Nancy Pelosi and company probably going to get out of town very promptly so they can go remind people why they...
Well, we'd like to kick them out of town, Steve.
We've really done a good job, and we need to be reelected. But it doesn't look like they're going to get the vote. Meanwhile, some people say if she is no longer Speaker next year, Steny Hoyer might wind up as the minority leader. Did you hear he wants to rename what Brian referred to, and many do, as the Bush tax cuts? He wants to rename them the Republican tax increases because they were set to expire at the end of this year. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it just makes no sense. I mean, it's irrational. It's illogical. The Democrats control the entire Congress. If Nancy Pelosi and Steny Hoyer can't get the votes for what they think is the right thing to do, then that's failed leadership, and they should look in the mirror and say that they failed.
And, Governor, on top of that, the fact of the matter is President Bush wanted to make them permanent, but he didn't have the 60 votes. So to avoid the filibuster, he went through the procedural method, which means you have to put an expiration date on them. That's the only reason they expire in 2010. And Steny Hoyer calls them, I think he called them Bush tax increases on Sunday. Chris Wallace almost fell off his chair.
Well, you know, again, I think we got to get Steny Hoyer maybe a little graph or chart so he can connect the dots, but he clearly had a bad day yesterday when he was trying to think through this.
Yeah. Let me ask you this, Governor. The president's on this full swing tour now, really reaching out to the young people of America again, going to colleges and universities and saying, look, even though I'm not on the ticket for the midterms, you should still be energized and come out and vote. And then you have Joe Biden, the vice president, telling the Democrats to stop whining, just go out to the polls. What do you make of that? Do you think some of that inspirational message from 2 years ago has gone?
It's hard to manufacture passion and sincerity, and frankly, if I was a college student and I looked at Joe Biden, I don't think I'd get really inspired. But beyond all of that, it's got to be sincere, it's got to be real, it's got to come from the gut, and it's got to come from the heart. So I don't think it matters how many speeches the president gives. I don't think it matters how many speeches Joe Biden gives. People ain't feeling the love because it's not there. The sentiment has shifted from independents, young people, to the Republicans, and now it's our chance to govern, and we got to do what we say we're going to do this time and make sure that we live up to the promises that we're making.
Ed Rollins was talking last week, and he said, I'm already having an appointment with Governor Huckabee to sit down and decide about what we're going to do, meaning they'll probably work together about running for president right after the new year. When does Governor Pawlenty sit down with his people and decide when he's going to run or if he's going to run?
Well, I like Mike Huckabee and Ed Rollins, so I have a lot of respect for both of them. But as to my future, I'm going to decide what I'm going to do early next year, Brian, probably in the January, February time frame.
Well, how handy, because in January your new book, Courage to Stand, is going to come out. And, of course, you mentioned earlier you got a website. And if people would like more information, go to our website, foxandfriends.com. Governor, we know you got a busy day, especially with the flooding in southern Minnesota, so we thank you so much for joining us live right here on Fox and Friends.
Thanks for having me on. Have a great day.
You too.
All right, you as well. Coming up on the show, the developer of the mosque near Ground Zero is in the middle of another media